Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube. It is your girl Honey. Welcome back people, welcome back, and those of you who are new here, welcome to my channel. And I'm going to be talking about the psychology behind Cancer rising. Before I even get into that, I'd like you guys to check out my website, honeysastro.com, where I have lots of services, I have lots of articles available there. Okay guys, I want to talk about the psychology behind Cancer rising. When we look into astrology, we need to understand the hows, the whos, and the whys and the wheres. And psychology allows us to understand what's actually going on behind the scenes and why we have certain placements, or why or what things in life have contributed to how we are today. So let's talk about the ascendant, the rising. The ascendant is your physical body, appearance, persona, identity, and it's your outlook on life. It can also be linked to the way in which we develop, how we learn to survive in our environment, but it can also be who we need to grow into. Because as a lot of us know the ascendant to be, it represents the mask that we show to the world. But what's behind the mask? Once the mask comes off, what are you left with? And that's why when it comes to astrology, we have to understand behind the mask, or the whys. So let's talk about the Cancer rising's background, where they come from, their home environment, their family. Because when it comes to psychology, we need to know the foundation to where they come from, to where they're going to end up, okay? To be born with a Cancer rising, absolutely beautiful rising. It's a lovely rising to have. Cancer risings are usually born into the world, and there is immediately a focus on family. And this can also be in reference to being very connected to the mother, being that one child who just sucks the life out of mum, drinks mama's breast milk all the time, just always needing to have that fulfilling feeling. Obviously, like, most babies are always hungry when they, after they're born, right? But Cancer risings will literally drain their mothers dry. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if a lot of Cancer risings experience being breastfed for a lot longer than maybe the average. Some people stop at 1 year. I stopped at 5 months. Some people might go on for longer, but Cancer risings, I wouldn't be mad if your mum breastfed you for maybe up to 3 years, because the first 3 years are absolutely paramount for the development of Cancer risings, emotions and nurturing abilities, especially because the 4th house is age 3. We always hear about when babies turn 2 years old and they are just into everything, they're being naughty. But when they turn 3, they're trying to develop and really establish their emotion. They can still be crying about the most silliest things, but it's about your parent, essentially your mum, coming in and saying, "Why are you crying? Explain yourself. What happened? That's okay. Don't cry." The way in which your mother nurtures you when it comes to in that moment is paramount to how you're going to deal with your emotions as an adult today. As a Cancer rising child, I would definitely encourage getting like an animal or a pet, or at least, I hate to say this after saying animal or pet, but at least a younger sibling, because it kind of gives them someone or something to care for, and it really stimulates that emotional development in their youth, because they need to have something to nurture. So obviously, not all Cancer risings come from a mum who's very loving and very nurturing, and sometimes we can be born into a family where there are a lot of emotional highs and lows, and it can be very uncomfortable or very frustrating to not have that sense of stability as a Cancer rising. A Cancer rising's environment is very important to them, and it's very important that the environment that they come from, there is a lot of stability from your parents. Your parents should have been able to emotionally support you and be present. And obviously when we think about Libra represents other people, relationships, marriages, partnerships. Libra tends to rule the 4th house of the home, foundation, roots, security, mother. So there can also be a lot of emotional or a lot of relationship themes in your household. These themes can have an effect on how you manage your interpersonal relationships. So we want to have a look at the relationship between your parents to see how that could have possibly affected how you interact with your friends and your romantic lovers. And the mothers out there who are probably watching this, probably thinking, oh, but you know, me and my partner, we broke up, we're not in a good place. It's very important you try to kind of have a good relationship, at least with you know, your Cancer rising baby's dad, or at least if you are dating someone new and you have them around your child, you're showing that there is stability in this relationship. Because Cancer risings are ruled by the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. It's always moving, which kind of makes them very moody. You know, one day being happy, next day being moody, one day being sociable, next day not being so sociable. So they can be very temperamental when it comes to their emotions. And this is why I'm always saying it's important that the environment that Cancer risings come from needs to be filled with a sense of security to encourage them that level of safety for emotional vulnerability, because there will be some Cancer risings who haven't had that safety environment, so they have a hard time processing their emotions. And then you have some Cancer risings who come from a great environment where they were able to display emotion. And if it's a healthy way of dealing with their emotions, they're not going to want to hide their emotions, but they'll be very emotionally intelligent to know when is a good time to be vulnerable and when is not. Because I have a lot of clients as well, you know, with Cancer risings that have been adopted, you know, been in foster care, social services, and it can be any rising whatsoever. However, when I look at the Cancer rising, it's like they have been exposed to a lot of highs and lows and ups and downs, and just desire that stability, you know. And that's why I'm saying, as parents of a Cancer rising, you've got to make it your mission to make your child as stable as possible. So Cancer risings who come from a difficult background, where you may not have had a lot of love from your parents, or you may have been through the system, you're likely to need to really grow and develop into your Cancer rising, because you didn't have enough of that in your childhood, which can make you someone who deep down is very naturally a nurturer. Even if you're the most manly, masculine man out there, regardless of gender, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable being around women who are able to display emotional vulnerability, because this is where you're going to feel more safe. Being around men, there can be more of a need for you to put on a front that you don't have these emotions or feeling them. I'm talking more about toxic masculinity, toxic men. But your purpose as a Cancer rising, because you've had a difficult background, you've got to learn emotional intelligence and allow yourself to process these feels. Now, if you come from an environment where you had your parents around, you may have likely been around people in the family who shared a lot of their emotions, who displayed lots of happiness, vulnerability, who cried sometimes, who shared anger, jealousy, frustration, but it was shared in the household. And as a Cancer rising, you know, you would have wanted to nurture this person who was always vulnerable and always shared emotions. Your family could have encouraged you to be vulnerable by, or at least nurturing, you know, looking after your siblings, looking after your pets. Oh my God, being that child that had like the hamster, the turtle, the dogs, like being that child who loved all of their animals, but your family would have encouraged you that this is okay. It's okay to show love to animals and to open up your home to them. They would have kind of taught you that psychologically it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay. I'm used to it. So you would have been exposed to that, and that kind of makes you very hyper aware of your environment. So growing up in that environment and now becoming an adult, you're very hyper aware and very sensitive of emotion. Cancer rising's ruler is the moon. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. The moon is fast, it's always moving. So if you guys are governed by the moon, a lot of you guys are likely to experience a lot of highs and lows in the space of a 28-day cycle. Especially as women, Cancer risings are likely to have very difficult menstrual periods or cycles. Painful, very long lasting, or it all depends on what it is you're doing in that month. Will depend on how your periods are likely to be in that month. So especially if you have a 12th house moon, an 8th house moon, and a 6th house moon, you know, these are difficult places for the moon to be natally. So a lot of the time, most of the month, you're going to experience challenges with your emotions. Very in tune, like so in tune, so intuitive. And I feel that the Cancer energy is more intuitive than the Pisces, Scorpio, but it's about that feeling, that gut feeling. And a lot of us don't trust our guts. And with that psychic or that intuitive skill that they have, they've mastered their way through life to understand, how to interact emotionally, or at least feel other people. That's why when you think about Cancer risings as well, you guys need to get into a space where you are developing your intuition. What is that thing? I forgot what it's called. I was actually told that I should do this by a psychic as well. When someone's passed away and you go and see a psychic, but you bring something of theirs to them. That guy, that psychic, Tyler, I forgot his name. I think he does that. You bring something to him that belonged to the person who had passed away, and he picks up on the energy. That's how extreme that you can go with that sort of intuition. And a lot of this can be inherited from the women in your family. There tends to be a very strong psychic or intuitive connection between you and your mum, your grandma, your aunties. When a grandma says, oh, someone's pregnant, I jumped off fishes. Grandma who just gets these visions, and she lets the family know what's happening. I had this dream, I saw this vision. That's what we see or hear that tends to be quite common in a Cancer rising's family, and that gets passed down onto you. There can also be more women in your family. There's a lot to do with emotions, gut instincts, and feelings. You guys can literally tell when there's a bad vibe in the room, or when something is literally about to happen. And that also highlights, sentimental things. Sentimental things mean so much to you because, again, it's that feeling. Cancer risings can also hang on to a lot of grudges. And as Cancer represents history, the past, you guys can very easily live in the past when things haven't quite been resolved. And when you live in the past, especially when it's something that's very negative, it can very easily affect your interpersonal relationships as an adult. And if you're unable to kind of move forward, that is a lot of negative energy that can just drain you. And it's about you releasing and letting that go. Now, because Cancer risings are always connected, to their mum or to their familiar environment, they're not the most social beings. The only way you will see a Cancer rising be social is if the conversation in that environment displays vulnerability everywhere. It's like a group of girlfriends. We all go out and the Cancer risings, they're kind of quiet, even though they are familiar with the group, but they are going to have their 2 cents, say their piece, once everybody has displayed a sense of vulnerability. Someone's crying, someone's talking about how the relationship is in shits, someone's talking about how they've been depressed, and then someone else is just laughing at some stupid joke. The Cancer rising likes to kind of be in an environment where everybody is able to display vulnerability. And a lot of that is, again, the Cancer rising is able to almost deflect a little bit from its own emotions, its own feelings. Now, I remember I had a client one time, I'm sure this was a guy client as well. I don't get much guy clients, but I probably get maybe 1 a month. Okay, not much. But he was a Cancer rising. I remember him complaining about how he just hates, having to feel things. And he mentioned that he's had to isolate himself from people because he knows that he's sensitive in his emotions, but he doesn't like to display that because to him, it's not masculine, or it's not considered as a man thing to do. I understood what he was saying socially, what he was talking about socially. However, we are not supposed to fight against what our gut is telling us to do. I feel for a lot of people that are fighting against their emotion, they are basically fighting who they are. And it's important that they are vulnerable, they embrace their emotions, and they are able to be their authentic selves. Because when you're not able to be yourself, it's an internal battle, and you've got to look at it as a gift. And sometimes the gift can essentially come from family members, being very connected to the women in your family. That might mean having more friends with women, because as a Cancer rising, you might feel like you connect a lot more with the people that are able to be a lot more emotionally accepting, or a lot more emotionally vulnerable. And that also allows you to control more of the situation by taking the attention off your own emotions. Now girlies, you guys know when your boyfriend is wearing that hoodie and he gives it to you to borrow, you keep it, because you know, like, that hoodie is my hoodie now, but that hoodie reminds me of him, it smells like him, and it just feels comfortable, and you become very attached to things. So there's always going to be a link towards things because there's a sentimental attachment to it. Obviously we're talking a lot about the Cancer risings who embody their feelings, right? But they like to also take the attention off themselves. Now let's also talk about how that affects people in relationships. Again, because of your psychological background and growing up in an environment where you desperately want to nurture and cradle and care for someone, it's easy for you to deflect from your own emotions by getting with someone who has emotional, expressive issues to nurture them through the process. This is why you guys have Capricorn in your 7th house, because Capricorn isn't very good with its emotions, and Capricorn can be very dismissive and very stern. And when you date people who embody that sort of energy, you're likely to be a support for them to really process their emotions whilst also deflecting from the emotional intensity that you deal with. You know, dating someone who struggles to just say how they feel and you ask questions, you still show support. But also bearing in mind, you guys are hiding from your own insecurities. That kind of defeats the purpose, because you then start to be an emotional support for someone else. So emotions are still governing your life still, but now you deflected completely from the self and you're now focusing on your partner's emotions. And again, this is all about self-discovery, self-awareness. And you kind of want to be with someone who also shines light on your emotions, you know? And this is why you guys have Capricorn in your 7th house, because 7th house being relationships and other people, Capricorn is like you become an authoritative person in your relationship. So you become the person who is supporting your partner through their highs and their lows, but it's a way in which you deflect, and you guys have to work on doing a bit less of that whilst also focusing on your personal development. Okay, so when we look at the psychology behind Cancer risings, your life is all about experiencing the highs, the lows to your emotions, and you are supposed to allow yourself to feel, to explore. So as a Cancer rising, a lot of your experience is going to be rooted in learning more about emotional intelligence, and that is okay. Like, it's very intelligent to be vulnerable, to establish things that really bring out the feeling within you. And that can be based on where your moon's positioned in your chart as well. If your moon's in the 5th house, maybe having kids will make you become a lot more emotionally vulnerable. Or maybe your moon is in the 9th house. That can be maybe traveling or becoming an author or writing. Or maybe if a moon's in the 11th house, that can be being connected to a community of people or doing some sort of charity work, you know. It's just about doing the things that make you become more emotionally available, vulnerable, expressive, and also allowing yourself to nurture you. So that's my video today, people, on the psychology behind Cancer rising. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. All right, bye bye.